It's early on Monday morning at the start of a week when hopefully all of the walls on this side of the house are going to start to look very different, both from the further repointing work and some initial work on the edges of the windows. The weather is forecast to be very hot, so the cooler box is back on site, and although there is a bank holiday in the middle for San Juan, there's going to be plenty of hard graft. So I need to open up now so the team can get started when they arrive. And I didn't have long because just after getting the doors open, the team arrived. And they were soon getting set up, which meant I didn't have long to blow some dust off the walls. Before we started work on them, using mortar that Sam had started to mix. Haggy would be starting work on one of the window edges, and Miguel and Alu needed to rearrange some scaffolding for the first wall section they would be working on. While I would continue repointing the section of the wall to the right. I will focus a bit more on Haggy's window work next week and film the full process a bit better. But in short, he was creating exact mortar lines that we will use later on for mortar that will cover the bricks and concrete lintels. As for this section of the wall I was working on, it had a slightly tricky ledge in the middle, which meant I had to create some slightly angled mortar joints. And after a reasonable restart to the repointing, it was time for the mid-morning break and a catch-up and chat about the weekend's football. Before we were back to our respective wall sections. Haggy's window work would also involve the creation of the outer sill, using recycled flat tiles from the roof, once he had the wall at the right height for adding them. With almost all the wall on the left repointed, Miguel was working on a final patch in the corner. While I would now work on a section with some deeper joints and bigger spaces to fill, which would take a bit longer to work on than these clips might imply. With the section finished, it was time for a closer look at the others' progress, and then a late lunch. With the hot weather, there are less wildflowers around, and a lot of the butterflies were tending to congregate on those that remain, like these clear patches on this plant. Then it was back for a final session of repointing, made slightly tricky by the scaffold bars, and which was briefly put on pause when Marcel and Yvette from Marseille dropped in to say hello. So that by the end of the day, once the team had left, I was back for some final clearing and brushing. Tuesday was due to be another hot day, and when the team arrived, one of the initial priorities was to create a bit more shade on the next part they would be working on. While I cleared a bit of rubble to create a bit more space for me to work on my next lower down part, which was another section with some deep joints and occasional holes to fill. Haggy started his day finishing the tile ledge on the first window, while Miguel and Alu would work on the extension wall, where Miguel would add some special impermeable mortar at the point the wall meets the roof tiles to create a little more protection from rainwater. While the wall work was progressing okay, the highlight of my morning was spotting a white admiral butterfly in the garden, which eventually settled next to the rubbish, and then here when I followed it to the trees. But this small blue wasn't quite so cooperative. While my workspace in the morning was a bit cramped, things didn't get easier when I started repointing above the buttress. Having finished above the buttress, my workspace options seemed to get worse when I moved to the top level to do work with the impermeable mortar at the roof joint. As my work above was only a small section, I decided against setting up a pulley system, but it did make mortar lifting a bit tedious. As I got ready for a final session of repointing after the team had finished, and after a quick refuel down below. And with the shade sheet no longer serving much purpose, first up I decided to open up the view of the wall a bit. And then rather than mix and lift more mortar, my work for the day would stop when my bucket was empty. It's Wednesday morning and today is the San Juan bank holiday, so the team will not be working, but with no one on site, it gives me a good opportunity this morning to come in and test and prepare a couple of things in relation to work in the next couple of days on the finishes on the wall. With a lot of water being used for cleaning and wetting walls, as well as the mortar, first up was a refill of the water deposits. And while they filled up, I moved on to my first check on the ground level at the back corner of the house, which I had planned to clear at a much later date, but after someone had asked a good question about it in the last video, and after the brief clearing work I did the day before, I now wanted to check just how easy it might be to remove the material up against the wall to potentially enable us to repoint it a bit lower down. Barney Rubberboard was back in action, and for a moment it felt like this time last year and my work on the ground floor, especially when the bedrock appeared to be a bit higher here than I had expected. Having finished my work clearing and checking the position of the rock against the wall on the far corner, I can now get on with what I really wanted to do this morning, which is to test the best way of cleaning the repointed walls, which I know is definitely going to involve some brushing where the mortar is a bit thicker, and then using the acid to take away some of the stains. But I just want to check which brush is going to be best, whether it's more of a cup or more of a disc, when is best to use the brush, and then also what strength of acid is most efficient. So I'm going to have to run a fairly controlled check against different parts of the walls, hopefully which will make everything over the next couple of days a little bit more efficient and a little more effective. For my test, which would be a little less controlled than I wanted, I would be working on the top right corner of the wall and varying my approach across different patches. And in my earlier chat, I should have been clearer. I was clearing mortar off the surfaces of the stones rather than from the repointed joint. On the far right side, I would test the brushes first, while nearer the middle, I would test the acid before doing any brushing. And after the acid clearing, I washed the surfaces off with water, as the builders had suggested to me. And while I waited for the walls to dry a bit better to see the results, I attempted to film some of the few butterflies out that day. For the final part of the test, I brushed off the section I'd cleaned with acid, and then brushed off the sections below for more tests later. Before running out of time and needing to tidy up before getting home for lunch with Laura. The team would be back on Thursday, so the cooler box was as well, especially as it was due to be another hot day. When the team was set up, they were back on their respective walls and windows. and I would spend time checking the results of my wall tests and trying a couple of different tests with the acid cleaning on the lower section before leaving that section free for Haggy to work on the next window. Which would see the return of the shade sheet. While up above, I would be finishing the points in contact with the roof, first with the impermeable and then the normal mortar. With the work up above thankfully finished, my next section was the lower parts of the buttress.
Dame el mío primero.
Once the team had finished for the day, I completed work on the side of the buttress, before I had to head home for some other things. But a few hours later, I would be back for a late evening session where I wanted to do some stone cleaning without covering the team with the dust I would be creating. It would also be the first time in a long while that I would be at the house late in the evening in midsummer and get to enjoy the different angles of light on the house and the views. And what felt like not long afterwards, I was back for the final day of work for the week. Surprisingly keen for more repointing and to see how much of the work we might be able to get finished. With new work positions, we all needed some scaffolding changes. Then Haggy would start on the lower two windows. While the rest of us would be repointing the lower part of the left-hand side, which with the lower heights and lack of unusual shapes was something of a pleasure to be working on. I left the camera on by mistake here, but I thought it gave a useful, truer picture of the work. Miguel has done some very good work on repairs to this wall this week, in particular replacing some bricks with more appropriate stones, but this would be my first time I caught some of it on camera. After my slightly late lunch, the rest of the day would be a bit of a hurry to try and finish the repointing before the team left. And I didn't do a very good job of filming some of the more complicated repointing work. But I think you will all have seen enough mortar work for this week.
Esta basura tirar, Talaría más.
No, we necessary. No demasiado alu, eh? And that is the end of work for this week, during which, despite the hot weather and the bank holiday in the middle, we have made good progress on the work on the walls on this side, with nearly all of them up to about the midpoint of the curve now repointed, and a lot of them on that side brushed and cleaned, while Haggy has steadily been creating the structure for the edges of the windows on this side, which is almost finished, and he'll be able to move on to these ones next week. While Miguel, with the help of Alu in the last 2 days, has been working around the curve and massively improving the way it looks, including changing some of the bricks for stones. So by the end of next week, after some more work on the walls, the windows, and a fair bit of tidying up, I'm hoping to be able to show you something like the finished look. So please do tune in again next week to see how we get on.